Hi class, in this video I'm going to go over the final self-lab. So I'm signed into my system as DevOps. Guys, sometimes it doesn't capture my mouse, so I have to click over on this black bar. And I'm in my working directory. So I'm going to sign in as root. I don't know why I did that. So I'm signed in as root. I'm going to prove to you that I don't have a user account called bferris. Okay, no user account called bferris. I'm going to list etc password or the etc directory. I'm going to grep for scale. So I'm going to list that directory. I'm going to list everything in that directory, even hidden files. Now let me explain what a skeleton directory is. A skeleton directory is a template directory. Every time I create a new user account, it will add these files to the user account automatically in their home folder. If I have a graphic interface, it will also add like a desktop folder, a downloads folder, a picture folder, a video folder, but that's really not part of the default user creation process. That's more of a GNOME thing. So every time I create a user account, it will have these files there. If there's any folders, it will also have those folders. So I'm going to create a user account called and I'm just going to show you that it doesn't exist currently, a user account called tuser. So I'm going to, and if you list the home directory, I don't have a tuser home directory. So I'm going to user add tuser. So I created that user account. If I sign in as that user and list my home directory, you will see I have the exact same files. So every time it creates a user account, it copies these files to the user's home directory and give the user permissions to those files. So I'm going to exit out of tuser and I'm just going to type user add alone. So if I want to create a custom skeleton directory with a different folder structure, I can specify with the -K and also with the -M. You have to use both. If you use -K, you have to use -M. I can create a user account based on a different template directory as opposed to etc scale. So I've already did this for you, and I created a template directory that includes all the default stuff we've been using in our DevOps user account. So if I do a list-al, not only do I have the traditional files, these ones right here, plus the Mozilla folder, I want to create a template directory that also has the Ansible working and the .ansible folder. So I went ahead and created a template directory, and then I tarred and zipped it. So you don't have to go through that process of making a custom template directory. I don't think at this stage you're able to do that and to get all the little gotchas that need to happen. So I've already done that, and I've zipped it. And I put it in my files directory. So I'm going to cd into files, or I can just list it. list all files. So I put this on D2L for you. So I want you to copy it, not to this directory, but to your files directory in your role once we create it, but I'll get to that in a few moments. Um, so I copied it to my files directory just to show you. And then I'm going to um, cd into that directory. I'm going to tar verbose extract. Um, it's using zip technology, and the file name is skel. And it will uncompress that file for me. And if I do a list now, you'll see I now have a skel Ansible directory. So if I list that directory and everything in it, you will see I've added these two items to a skeleton directory. If I do a tree, if I do a tree -a, that will show me all my hidden files as well. So I have in the .ansible hidden directory, I have our LDAP plugin. In our Ansible working, I have a config, an Ansible config. I have a files directory. I have a group vars directory with some var files already there. In the inventory directory, I have a LDAP inventory YAML file that will use the LDAP plugin to query Active Directory for our inventory list. I've also customized the .bashrc file to include our two aliases that we've been using in the class. And just to give you an idea what our Ansible config looks like, sorry, the only thing different is I've added this so it doesn't prompt you to download all the host keys, it'll just do it automatically. So it's our basic structure we've been using this whole time, but I want to automate that process. When you create a user account, I want that all to be pre-configured for you. So I'm going to go back to um, my working directory. I'm going to do code um, test. Just a little playbook that I created that'll just copy that directory to the location it needs. I just want to give you show you how to do this one task. So let me pause the video for one moment. I'm getting text from students. Okay, so here I have a playbook with one play called copy skel directory. I'm going to copy it from this location to the Etsy directory. So notice that I don't have an ending slash. If I put a slash right here at the end, like that, it will copy the directory and nothing in it. But if I don't put the ending slash, it will copy the directory and everything in it. So again, if I list Etsy and grep for skel, it only shows my default skeleton directory. So I'm going to do Ansible playbook. test, and all that's going to do is copy that directory into the right place. And this is what you're going to want to do in your um, role. I have a Pennsylvania accent, so it's hard for me to say that word. Okay, so now I'm going to grep for the scale, and you'll see I have two directories now, as opposed to one before. So I'm going to show you how to use this directory, how it would come into play. So I'm going to sign in as root, cat, Etsy, password, and grep for bferris. So I don't have a bferris account. So I'm going to do user add, my full name. I'm going to base it on our new template directory as opposed to the default. If you don't specify, it will use the default directory. And if you use -k, you have to use -m. And then here's the user account name. And in reality, I would have to set the password. Okay, so that automatically created my user account. So I'm going to sign into that user. Now, if I'm signing in from root, it's not going to ask me for a password. But if I was signing in from another user account, it would prompt me for a password. Again, the space hyphen is important. So this is space hyphen space. So I want to sign in with bferris's profile. I want to be placed in bferris's home directory. If I didn't put that hyphen in there, it will leave me in root directory, root's home directory. I don't want that. So if I do a list-al, now my default user account, my default directory structure has that .ansible and the Ansible working directory there. So if I go into Ansible working and I do a Ansible inventory list, it will show me everything about that, my inventory file. If I do a graph, it'll give me a nice graphic thing. It shows, now again, that plugin based these group names on the OU structure on my DC. So I had an OU called Linux, I had an OU called domain controllers, I had an OU called Windows, and I also included the variable files for those groups because I knew what was going to get created. Um, so if I do an Ansible all list host, I can see an abbreviated list of all the hosts. I could do an Ansible uh, Windows, that's the group that only has the MS server in it. And I'm going to use the module win ping. It's going to use the variables in here to know how to sign in and everything. I could also do that for domain controllers. Since there's only one item in that group, I'm just going to run it against DC. Now, on your lab that you're required to do, I have you also include creating the SSH folders. And I'll show you the lab in a moment. With my playbook, all I did was create the scale directory based on that that tar file that I gave you. I manually created the user account using the user add command. You're going to use your role to create that user account and to copy these keys. So I'm just going to manually create the keys. Guys, I can't remember the commands. I can never remember the commands, but I don't need to because I have um, the ability to tab twice. So I'm going to type SSH tab. And that's going to show me all the commands that start with SSH. So I'm going to do SSH keygen to generate a key for me. You're going to do this inside of your role. It's going to ask me where I want to save it, the default location, no passphrase. So it created my key. So if I list.ssh, if I list my home folder.ssh, you can see I have two keys now. If I do that all along, you can see they were just created too. 1605, 1606 up here. So these were two brand new created keys. The next thing I want to do is copy them over to RHS1 and RHS2 into into an authorized key file. So I'm going to do SSH copy ID, and I'm going to put them in the DevOps account because that's the account we're going to use to do administration for Ansible. At RHS1, it's going to ask me to copy the host key and then sign in with the password. So let's test it. Oh, I exited out too many times. I'm going to sign back in as B Ferris. So now I'm going to test it. So basically what they did was it took my public key, copied it over to the other machine, and inserted it in the authorized host file. Excuse me, authorized key file. So I'm going to test it to make sure I can sign in without a password. SSH DevOps at RHS1. So I'm able to sign in. No problem, no key. No password. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy the key over to RHS2. Accept the server key. And it copied the key over. So now I can sign in as DevOps at RHS2. So basically, I sign an authentication object with my private key. I send that authentication object over to the other machine. It compares all the keys in the authorized ID file. It's able to decrypt with my public key, so it knows it's me that signed in. I'm going to exit out of here. So I'm back on RHS1 now. Your role is going to do that automatically. There's a module called let me just do a Google search. It'll be easier. So there's a module that will allow you to manipulate SSH keys. And if that seems intimidating to do, please refer to Lab 5 because you already did it. Here in this particular case, you grabbed a key, a public key, copied it to a files directory, then you deployed that key using this authorized key directory. Authorized key module. So you've already done this. I did it manually. You're going to do it with your role. Okay, so let's go into we're signed in as me. I'm back at my managed the control host. Now I'm going to do Ansible because I can't run any commands against a Linux server until I'm able to sign in with my key. So I'm going to do a Linux, and the module I'm going to do is ping. But first I need to get back into my working directory. Okay, so I was successfully able to ping both Linux boxes, RHS1 and RHS2, because I'm using my key to remotely access the machines. Guys, I'm pretending my RHS1 is also a managed host. So, um, I'm going to exit out of bFairs. I'm going to exit out of root again. So I'm now signed back in as DevOps. I'm going to clear my screen. I'm going to list my home directory, the .ssh. Now I'm going to cat. I have a file in the SSH folder now called authorized keys. And in that will be the public key that I just copied over. So when I did that SSH copy ID, that's what I was doing. I was taking my public key, connecting to the remote machine, and inserting it in this file and associating my name to it. Okay, so now let's go into the assignment. I'm going to go back here to my Linux class. And I'm going to go into Lab 7. So what I want you to do is initialize a role, a blank role. So I'm going to use the Ansible Galaxy init command. I'm going to cd into my Ansible configuration folder, the .ansible, and you should already have a directory called roles. If you don't, create it. If you did Lab 7, you'll have this directory. I'm going to do Ansible gallery init. I'm going to go back to our lab that we're about to do. There's your tar file that you need to download on your Linux box. I want you to call this role DevOps. That's the user that created it and the purpose of the role. DevOps.Ansible user. DevOps.Ansible user. So now if I list, I can see I have a directory called DevOps.Ansible user. List-al, and you can see that it's a directory. Now I'm going to list that directory. Actually, I want to do a tree. Okay, So when you unzip that file that you're going to get off of D2L, you're going to specify this file right here. You're going to unzip it inside of this directory. This is going to be vars that whoever implements this role can make changes here. This is going to be where you store your files that you go to deploy out to the remote machines. If you have any handlers, they can be stored here. Any metadata like version numbers, license, things like that will be stored here. This README is where you document your role. The task, unlike a playbook where you have to list a task, give it a name and things like that, all you need to do is just list all your tasks in this location. If you have any template directory, template files you want to create, like Agenda 2, that's where they'll be located. And good practice is to create a sample playbook against a sample inventory so they can test it to learn how to use it. And these are vars designed by the designer that shouldn't be changed by the end user who implements this. So what you can do is do Ansible roles how to. I believe this is the one I was looking at. Here's kind of a little bit of a write-up about how to do roles. You also have the book, and it gives you some examples. Uh, they create some files for you to deploy. That's where they put them. And oh no, this is the files. This is the task. So in their main uh, YAML file under task, they say include this other file. You don't need to do that. You can just put your task right here. So basically, in that, they just list all the tasks that they need to do. You need to put that directory in that file subdirectory. So you're going to list all your tasks in here in kind of this format. They don't have to be all one single line. You can list the task like we've been doing so far with names and things like that. In fact, I highly suggest putting the names because when you run the role, you'll know where it's at. So you put your task in here, you unzip your file in this directory. Um, you need to make sure that, I'm going to go back to our lab. You need to make sure that you copy that scale Ansible directory to Etsy. You need to create the user account. You need to fetch that user um, key and store it somewhere. You need to grab the user's public key for whatever user you just created. And then you need to use this authorized key module to deploy that key. Guys, just to make it easy, I'm saying do it only to RHS1. So just to keep it simple. And then I give you a sample playbook to run that role. Sorry, that should be 3 dashes. Okay, so you're going to have 3 dashes, the name of the play, the host is going to apply to RHS1. I don't really need to deploy um, an Ansible user to RHS2 because we haven't installed Ansible in RHS2. It's going to have the roles, and the role I'm going to implement is the one called DevOps.user under Ansible underscore user. I'm going to supply some variables. These are variables you're going to use in your task when you use that user module. These are things that you want to do. You can create the key at the same time you create the user. And at that point, go fetch the key and deploy the key to a managed host. The only managed host I want you to deploy it to happens to be RHS1, which is also our control host. Um, and again, you want to deploy that key to the DevOps user on RHS1. If I look at my commands, it was a different user account. I did the key copy to DevOps at RHS1. Okay, guys, that's the only thing I can really think of for any information that you might have. Monday, when we have our live session, that's where I can answer any questions you might have. You're not going to have questions until you get your hands wet and start working on this project until you get some problems. Um, so I need you to start as soon as you can. So on Monday and Wednesday, I'm available to you to answer questions. Okay, that's it for this video. I'm going to, um, the only thing I think I need to really put in here, um, okay, guys, I want you to put your password in the vault file. I intentionally didn't add the password here. So you're going to have to store your password in the vault file. Okay, guys, I'm going to upload this video and update the title so you know that the lab is fully designed. And if there's anything you want to add to this or have questions, hold them till Monday so we can do it in front of everyone because you probably aren't the only person. Thank you very much.